Okay, so this lesson is an upper intermediate lesson designed by Annie and myself, so you don't need to write a formal reference. The main aim of the lesson is to get students talking about a friend or friends using different adjectives of character. And we're also going to get them using questions using like. So for example, what does she like doing? What is he like, etc. Okay, so how are we going to break the lesson down? Okay, so all good lessons start with a lead-in, and the purpose of a lead-in is to get the students engaged in the topic. So one way of doing this is to set up some discussion questions. We've given you some ideas here. You could use these or your own. Do the first one together. So, everyone, look at the first question. Where do people meet new friends? What do you think? So you could nominate someone or just get them to talk briefly together for a couple of minutes and get some feedback, and then put them into small groups or do it as a whole group and just tell them you're going to sit back and listen for 5 minutes while they discuss the rest of the questions. Then get some feedback by nominating individual students for their answers. Another way of doing it is to get the students to write their thoughts in the chat box. You could even have a mixture of the two. Next, we need to introduce our target language, which are the adjectives of character or personality. So we're going to start off here by introducing 3 of the adjectives, and they need a context. And we're going to move from meaning to form. So I've got a photo here of my friend Sorrel, and you could show a photo of a friend of yours, or photos of 3 people that you know, and use these photos to elicit the adjectives to get the students started. So I might say, this is my friend Sorrel. She's a good friend of mine. I like her a lot. She wants to be an actress. She works really hard at being an actress and she wants to be the best. Can you think of an adjective to describe Sorrel? Wait and see if anybody answers. Okay, it begins with A. Good, ambitious. Ambitious. Sorrel is ambitious. Okay, so you've done an example. Ambitious. Check the meaning. So if someone is ambitious, do they work hard usually? Yes, they do. And do they want to be the best at their job? Yes. Ambitious. And then we want to focus on pronunciation. So let's drill it. Ambitious, ambitious. Repeat. Ambitious, ambitious. Do some individual drilling. How many syllables? Listen. Ambitious. Yeah, good. 3. And where's the stress? Ambitious. 2. It's on the second syllable. Good. And then I might show the word and highlight the stress for the students to see. I could then elicit 2 more adjectives to describe Sorrel, or I could look at 2 other photos of 2 other friends and elicit 1 adjective for each friend from the students. Students will be engaged in this because I'm talking about my friend or friends, and they'd like to find out about their teacher. It's a nice way to personalise the topic. Next, we're going to introduce the rest of the adjectives, and we want to check that the students understand the meaning of the adjectives. So you can see here we've got a list of 12 adjectives on the left and the definitions on the right. We need to create a task out of this, something that the students can do. So we're going to mix up the definitions and get the students to match the adjective with the correct definition. The easiest way to do this is to put numbers down the sides of the adjectives and letters down the sides of the definitions, so that when the students match them together, either on the chat box or on a piece of paper, they can just write the number and the letter. For example, ambitious might match with D, so they would write 1D. It's quicker and easier for the students. You can put them into small groups, into breakout rooms, so that they can peer teach and help each other. You can move between the breakout rooms and monitor how they're getting on. Otherwise, you can just keep them in the main room and tell them to talk amongst themselves while you just sit back and listen without getting involved. When you're happy that they've finished, or most of them have finished, do some feedback. Nominate for answers and make sure they can see the correct answer written down. So have it ready on a slide so that they can see the answers. It's really important to not just give verbal answers, but to also make them visual. Feedback is also a good way for you to double check any meaning problems that seem to be coming up still, and any pronunciation problems. They might confuse sensitive and sensible, for example, and you might need to check that again. So if I'm sensitive, am I quite emotional? Yes. And if I'm sensible, do I always do the right thing or the wrong thing? I always do the right thing. Good. What about this word generous? Doesn't look like generous, it looks like generous, but we pronounce it generous, and you might want to drill that then. So anything that you notice that comes up from this activity can be checked again in the feedback to the activity. So we've checked they understand the meaning of the adjectives, and we've done some work on pronunciation. Now it's time for some practice. We want to see if the students can actively use the new language. One way of providing controlled practice, i.e. where there's only one possible answer, is to give the students a gap fill. So we've got 11 sentences for 12 adjectives, and only one of the adjectives is possible in each sentence. So say to the students, we're going to do a gap fill. I want you to put one of the adjectives in each gap. Let's do the first one together. Number 1, John is a very person. He's always smiling and sees the funny side of everything. What do you think the answer is? Which adjective goes in this gap? I'm going to give you 1 minute to write down the answer. They can either do this in the chat box or with a pen and paper. Step back, wait. Now, after a minute, get them to just quickly compare their answer and nominate someone to give you the answer. Good, the answer is upbeat. He's a very upbeat person. And put the answer in the gap so that they can see. Again, you might want to put them into breakout rooms, into small groups, so that they can peer teach and help each other. Then do some feedback with everyone back together and make sure you fill in the answers as you elicit them from nominated students. You can either do the answers as you go along, or you can elicit the answers and show them all the answers at the end on a separate slide. The next task is a correction task, where students need to look at the 4 sentences and identify whether they are correct or incorrect based on their understanding of the meaning of some of the trickier adjectives. So I would say to them, look at the sentences and tell me if they are correct or incorrect. Let's do number 1 together. Carlos is very sensible. He understands when other people are feeling sad. Is that correct or incorrect? talk together 1 minute. Let the students talk, then nominate someone. Hopefully they'll say it's incorrect because it's not sensible, it's sensitive. Good. Okay, now look at 2, 3 and 4 and do the others. Work together. Discuss your ideas because I'm going to ask you at the end. This will only take probably about 3 or 4 minutes, and then you can nominate students to give you the answer and to identify what the corrected version is of the incorrect sentences. Then we're going to move on to questions using like. They need to use these questions in the speaking activity that's coming up at the end. What I would do is say to them, okay, we're going to think about some questions using the word like. You need these for some speaking you're going to be doing at the end of the lesson. I'm going to give you 3 sentences. They're all answers. What are the questions? So just show the students the 3 sentences which are the answers. Give them time to read them, and then try and elicit the 3 questions using like. You could help them by putting a what 4 gaps with a question mark, B what 3 gaps, etc., to give them an idea of the structure that you're looking for. Don't be afraid of the silence here. Just sit back and let them try and work out what the questions are. Then nominate some students to tell you what they are. You can check meaning further at this stage by asking a few more questions like, okay, so when we talk about personality, which question do we ask? What is she like? Very good. And when we talk about appearance, what's the question? What does she look like? Etc. It would be useful to do some pronunciation work on the questions as well. What does she like doing? What does she like doing? And what's she like? What's she like? We want our students to learn how to pronounce words and phrases like native speakers. Okay, so we've moved from controlled practice on to now freer practice. This is where we give the students the opportunity to use the language they've learned in a freer way. So we're focusing more on fluency and building confidence than accuracy here. Tell your students you want them to talk about a friend of theirs. But before they do that, they need to fill in this sheet. The best way to show them what they need to do is to show them an example. So I would put my friend's name, Sorrel, adjectives, generous, ambitious, etc., etc., and fill in the rest of the details. I do this in note form because that's what I want my students to do. I want them to write notes. I don't want them to be simply reading text aloud, word for word, in the speaking practice later. Elicit what the questions would be, and then give them 5 minutes to fill in the sheet about their own friend. When they've done that, you can demonstrate the activity with a strong student. Okay, Juan, what's your friend's name? He answers. And what's she like? Etc. Now give students the opportunity to talk together and share information about their friends. You just monitor. When they've finished, you can nominate students to tell the class about the person they spoke to and that person's friend. Now thank the students and close the lesson.